All right, apologize for the delays. Summer camp schedule, hard to manage. New routines. All right, we are going to start with a zoning text amendment, 1905, industrial zones, landscape contractors. We've got Jared Casey Anderson, Jason Sartori, Greg Russ, his son, what is 80? Pam, why don't you take us through the packet?
Good morning. Yes, ZTA 1905 has lead sponsors were Councilmember Hucker and Council Vice President Katz, with co-sponsors Councilmember DeWando and Council President Navarro. A landscape contractor is defined is a defined land use that currently is allowed as a permitted use in the moderate industrial zone. This ZTA would allow a landscape contractor as a use in the light industrial and the heavy industrial zones as a permitted use. That's how the ZTA was introduced. The heavy industrial zone, as the name indicates, is really intended for industrial uses that have a large impact, and that's the impression that everyone gets when you hear the name and when you locate in that zone. The light industrial zone is intended to provide more of a transitional industrial zone between either commercial or residential uses and a more moderate or heavy industrial zone. The number of parcels that would be affected, residential parcels that abut heavy industrial, light industrial zone are listed at the bottom of page 2 of the staff report. And most of these properties, 75% of them, do not abut a residential properties in those zones. The Planning Board and Planning Staff recommended approval of ZTA 1905 with 2 amendments. They suggested a required 50-foot setback between the lot line of a residentially zoned property and a building or parking, including loading areas and other site operations for the landscape contractor, and prohibit access from a street classified as residential. You had a public hearing and you had 3 speakers. One was planning staff for the planning board, another was the county executive representative with a few suggested modifications related to screening, hours of operation, building height, and increased setback. And the third person who spoke was an owner of a small woman-owned business that does landscape contracting, and how difficult it is to find affordable space without the ability to locate in these light industrial areas, especially in the down county. So council staff looking at this really says there's 2 issues. One, should there be greater protection for properties in the light industrial zone area, properties that abut those zones if they're residentially zoned. The testimony from the Executive and Planning Board also focused on the light industrial zone. And so the first question is, should it be a limited use in the light industrial zone, or should it just remain as a permitted use? If you want it to remain permitted, then there's no standards for it, and you're basically saying a landscape contractor can be a use that's allowed in the light industrial, moderate industrial, heavy industrial zones without standards. If you want to add a standard to the light industrial zone for this use, then it would be a limited use, and we would discuss what that standard might be.
So, I'm a little bit confused here. The ZTA says it can be a permitted use. You're saying making it a limited use?
Yes, the recommendation would be just for the light industrial, not for the heavy. Permitted in heavy, permitted in moderate, but when you're in the light industrial zone, because some of those properties in the light industrial zone, 102 of them, abut something with a residential zoning classification, you would have a limited use standard. What council staff is recommending, rather than a 50-foot setback, would be a screening, as you can see, that's on the last page, on page 4, requiring screening with a depth of 12 feet, which really just provides that privacy and that respectfulness of being near a residential property.
So that is an alternative approach, ensuring that there's screening.
Yes.
And dealing with the setback.
Correct. And probably, you know, I think some of these properties in the light industrial zone may not be extremely deep, and so you may then even eliminate more properties where you could do this if you had such a large setback.
Okay. Planning comments on this one?
I think we're okay with the screening. The whole purpose is the light industrial zone because it's a transitional zone to non-industrial types use, specifically residential, to provide some kind of screening. There is where we were headed there. We used the 50 feet as just a starting point to get the conversation going. So.
All right. Colleagues, Joanna.
I think you can go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see it was first.
No, thank you. Great, that was going to be my question, if you're okay with that, because I think the idea is we want to allow this business, we don't want to limit the business opportunity, but we also want to infringe on residential, and I know there's a lot of those light industrial areas, so if you're good with this, that's great. So, and you, Pam, you very articulately mentioned what the recommendation was, and 12 feet with screening. So I think I'm good. I just wanted to say, as a co-sponsor of this, I think it's a good thing. We want to obviously balance the needs of our business community with the needs of the residents, and I think this does a good job. So that's all I have to say. And here's another sponsor of the amendment. Mr. Friedson.
Yeah, I agree as long as everybody is comfortable. I had a question, though, and I shared the view, right, that this is kind of a transitional zone and finding a way to permit it, but in an appropriate way that is in keeping with that transitional nature of the zone makes sense to me. I think it was a good recommendation. Just had one question. We had one business owner that testified. What zone are they in? Do we know?
I don't know that they're currently located in what zone they're located. I mean, currently today, they could be in a moderate industrial zone. I don't know that we have many of those down county. Really, it's light industrial in the down county area. I know the owners reside in Silver Spring. So I don't know that they mentioned where they actually have their business located.
I know. Do you know?
She just mentioned that it was in downtown Silver Spring, somewhere in that area, so.
Well, I think that's where their clients are. It might be where their office is, but I'm not sure that's where their facility is. But I know that we lost some landscape contractor facilities with the Purple Line. There was some in Littonsville. We lost. It could have been that they were there. I don't know.
I think her main point, I actually know the family because kids went to high school together. I think their main point was that it is difficult to find property to locate in that is down county where they are. So they may be actually just right outside the county, but would prefer to locate in the county, which they could do in a light industrial zone if the use was allowed. But since it's not currently, that's their difficulty, is having to do all that commuting of their trucks and businesses from farther out.
Brian is trying to tell us something.
She's an IM.
Oh, she's
primarily looking at IH. But
okay. Right. So we were just told that the business is currently located in the moderate industrial zone, but would like to have a broader view of where they can search for affordable.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to solve a problem to address a specific issue that was brought forward, and we weren't landing on what we thought was a good compromise, but didn't actually solve
Right.
the problem that it was attempting. And now we have the bill sponsor here, and so I just wanted to make sure that we weren't drifting too far away from that. And but I'm comfortable with the recommendation as has been brought forward, depending on what the bill sponsor thinks.
Well, the lead sponsors are Councilmembers Hucker and Katz.
I thought we just co-sponsors.
Jawando and Navarro, Council President, being co-sponsors.
Withdrawn on that.
But the co-sponsor may wish to make a comment. I don't know. All right. Good. Well, I like staff's recommendation. I agree. And sounds like we're all good with that.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Council next.
Thank you. Next item is the Small Business Assistance Program. Gene.
And I'm also joined by Ms. Boyer from the Department of Finance.
All right. Come on up, Ms. Boyer. And
Appreciate all the help.
Justin Stone.
Unfortunately, he is unable to make it, but I believe, given the topic, we'll probably be good with just Ms. Boyer.
Okay, we are stone free.
So the executive regulation 1719 was submitted to the council as method 2. Just in terms of understanding method regulations, it means the council can either approve or disapprove or take no action. And if they take no action, it would go into effect at the end of the 60-day clock. Council staff always recommends that the council at least review method 2 and either approve or disapprove. In this instance, what the new executive regulation will do for the Small Business Assistance Program is increase the maximum available to businesses impacted or adversely impacted by county construction projects from $75,000 to $125,000. Other than that, it has no impact on the rest of the administration of the program. It will continue as it has over the last year and a half. Council staff does note 2 items related to this. Obviously, by increasing the maximum impact will go up. Finance staff estimates that to be roughly $500,000 based on about 10 businesses are likely to achieve the 75,000 maximum that's currently in the regulation. And if all of them are able to receive the full 50,000, that's how you get to the $500,000. Staff believes that's a good estimate, also believes it's a little high, given how the program works and how adverse impact needs to be proven. And so given the amount of funding that the council put in for this year and the amount of rollover in the Economic Development Fund, we're well positioned for this year, even if we do increase the $125,000 or increase the maximum to $125,000.
Can you remind us how adverse impact is proven?
Actually, I'll turn to Ms. Boyer about that.
Sure. So companies can provide quarterly financial statements for us. We set a baseline of what the company's profitability was prior to construction, and then we compare quarterly so we come up with an average, and then when they submit generally quarterly financials or twice a year financials, or it could be an annual tax return, we compare that to what their profitability had been prior to the construction project, and then assistance is provided based on the difference between the two.
Okay. And how many businesses are benefiting from this now?
So currently there are 20 businesses in the area who have received assistance of some sort. Some of them have gotten single disbursements, others have gotten multiple disbursements over the year and a half that we've actively been administering the program in Wheaton.
Okay.
Hold on.
I think,
I was going to say, I had one last item real quick before the council members jump in. The Economic Development Fund does have a requirement that the executive must notify the council for any offer to a single business that goes over $100,000. Since the Small Business Assistance Program is also part of the EDF, this requirement holds true for that. Council staff believes that's mostly a notification requirement to make sure we're not providing large sums of business assistance before the council has a chance to weigh in. Given that this went through the register of the county, it's been notified to the public, it's going through the PHED committee right now, council staff does not believe there's any additional work the executive must do for these individual businesses under the Small Business Assistance Program. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of how the law works and how this program would work with this regulation.
is this a maximum cap or is this an annual cap?
For the Economic Development Fund law,
Raises the maximum award available from 75 to 125
it's maximum lifetime.
lifetime. So we're talking about businesses that are bumping up against their cap because it's been several years.
Correct.
All right. Okay.
And then the last point I have is that the way the regulation works, the only real item up for debate today is the maximum that's been amended by the executive. The rest of the regulation was not changed, and so if council members have questions about that, we certainly can have them, but that would not be an item up for discussion in terms of whether it would change or not.
Okay. Great. I know Council President had a big hand in this policy. We'll go through committee colleagues and then go to the Council President. Mr. Friedson first.
Thank you. So you answered one of my questions. It wasn't in the packet of how many businesses are currently using this. I saw how many businesses have currently maxed out. But it sounds like you said 20 businesses have utilized this program. Is that
20 have utilized, 3 have hit the maximum $75,000 at this point.
right? So of the 20, do we have any idea of how much they've utilized? What the average is, or?
So since the program started, we've dispersed a total of $609,000 to the 20. Average disbursement has been $16,076 is the average disbursement, and that since the program started, we have dispersed over $609,000 to those 20 businesses.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful information. So, could you just give me a sense of, what kind of business we're talking about and how this normally works? I mean, how often are they, requesting? Is there a time? The question was asked: is this, it sounds like it's lifetime amount is the cap, not annual. But what would are there specific reasons or specific items that are being asked for reimbursement? I mean, how does that work?
So it's all, so again, to get back to the earlier question, so we set a baseline of what the companies had been making, what their margins had been prior to the construction project beginning. And that sets their average annual, or we can break that down to a quarterly profits or revenues that were being generated during that time period. And then once the construction started, they submit financials, and some businesses submit them fairly regularly. Sometimes they come in monthly or quarterly. Other businesses wait till year end and submit an annual, which shows the difference between revenues generated prior to construction and a dip in revenues since construction has affected the business. And then we make disbursements based on when those financials come in. So all the businesses kind of operate on a different schedule. And we're talking about a variety of business types down there. So a number of restaurants, bakeries, things like that, who depend a lot on foot traffic. So when you have a construction project that's taking up a lot of the parking spaces, for customers, they really see a downtick in their business. So those are some of the businesses have had some issues. There are a number of accounting firms, electronic sales, there's e-solutions, so there's a number of, it's just a variety of small businesses that are all in that affected area. So it's not any one industry type, but definitely a lot of different businesses. And again, depending on how they do their financials internally, we sometimes get those financials very regularly. Also, we have LEDC, it works with them on the ground. They do a lot of technical assistance support to the businesses there. So it's not just we're having problems, it's also, they can get assistance with their business plan or marketing plans. I know a number of them have beefed up their online presence to try to get the word out to people that they're still there, still open, still operating, things like that. So we are getting a lot of great technical assistance from the folks at the Latino Economic Development Corporation for them as well.
Got it. And so if they're requesting monthly distributions from this fund, they can keep coming back monthly until they hit the cap?
Until they hit the cap, correct.
There's no limitations on
That's
that.
right.
Okay. And where in the EDF does is this additional money coming from? Right. Presumably we appropriated.
So we're not asking for any additional money. All we're asking for is to change the maximum cap from lifetime maximum $75,000 to lifetime maximum $125,000. We believe with the current appropriation that was made for FY20, plus some of the rollover funds we have from this program from FY19, that we will not need to request any supplemental funding for the program for FY20.
So how much money is currently in this account for the SBAP?
So $450,000 was appropriated as part of the FY20 budget, and we have about $105,000 that will be rolling over. So just over $550,000 will be available for the program for the remainder of FY20.
And we've currently spent $609,000.
Correct, over the last year and a half.
Year and a half.
So that, correct.
So you don't think there's going to be any growth this year in requests?
There will be some, but we believe that the $550,000 that we have allocated for the program will be enough to cover the funds that are requested.
Okay.
I'm going to just jump in here. Is it for losses that are incurred in 20? Are we likely to need to reappropriate a significant amount of money in next year's fiscal budget, not this one we just passed? Or is it's somewhat, it's based on the past history.
Right.
So we could have businesses coming to us after the new building has opened, saying that, yes, but for half of that year, I was.
That's correct. As long as they can show the loss during the period of construction.
Period of construction.
Right, they could still apply, but the building should be open and operational at this time next year. So it's only 12 more months of construction, basically.
It was August of next year, so it'll be some time.
Some, yeah, but a lot of that will be internal, finishing up internally, and we're hoping that a lot of the parking spaces are returned. So, correct. So, right.
Mr. Joando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
So 550,000, just to pick up on a point Mr. Friesen was making, remaining in FY '20, and you're saying you think that's enough, even though it was 609 allocated in the last year and a half. And what are you basing that analysis of it's enough on? What are the factors that you use to make that determination? I know it's not an exact science.
Yeah, so Justin Stone, who administers the program, he actually went through and did a fiscal analysis of the companies that we've been working with so far. How many of them are actually still being negatively impacted? Many of them, we actually have some companies who have not been negatively impacted, who have applied for the program but have been denied because they are actually making more money now than they were before construction. So there are some positive stories coming out as well. So we just believe the timing of the construction and the way things are going, and again, some of the technical assistance is helping some of these companies be smarter business people and make some good decisions about what they're doing and how they're spending their money on. So he did a deeper dive into the fiscal impact, and we did work with OMB as we were looking at those numbers as well.
That's great to hear that there are actually some people making more money in the construction. And the other question I had, just realizing that, okay, 29 have applied, 20 have received, 3 have maxed out. And there's about 100 businesses that are eligible, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Approximately.
And how are you doing? I know you said the Latino Economic Development Corporation is helping, but how's the outreach? And what do you have planned in making sure that people know that this is available and the maximum? Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Sure, and a lot of that has been LEDC. They've been on the ground. They have actually gone to every single business to let them know the program's available and to let them know that assistance from them is available as well. Many of the companies either are not affected or are still working on their paperwork and have not yet submitted. But that's been a lot of, specific one-on-one outreach from LEDC. There is information on the county's website and the county's business portal.
Everyone's been visited.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, this seems great. Don't have a problem with it. If you all think it's great to provide more assistance. I know this is a problem in several parts of the county where we had this in downtown Silver Spring and with Purple in downtown with that. Yes, in other places. So glad this is working, and I look forward to supporting it. So thank you.
Great. Council President Navarro.
Thank you. I'm very happy that we're finally here. This I think we need to give a lot of credit to the businesses that have participated. They did identify that this cap, which was not really based on any particular analysis. I mean, I think we just figured, this would be a good way to start. But I'm really happy to see that so many businesses have taken advantage of this particular assistance. I mean, it's amazing that, the bill that I introduced was in 2012. Right. And it was really out of a lot of conversation with the businesses and organizations that were there doing the advocacy, who really felt strongly that we needed to do something. And so this was kind of like my answer to that issue. The one thing that I would love to have, if the chairman would indulge at some point, would be great to have LEDC and, the groups that have been doing this work around the technical assistance. I think that I need to understand better how that is connecting to the businesses who are asking for the assistance, because as it was asked, I think it was Councilmember Friesen about what kind of businesses. You have a mix. You have a mix of, some businesses that have a very strong business practices, et cetera, and you have some that are sort of mom and pops. So it would be great to understand how the technical assistance has helped those businesses move forward, because we heard time and time again that we didn't want to change the character of Wheaton, but that meant that we needed to support these, small businesses that contribute to that character along this revitalization project, with the hope that they can not only write it, but that they can maybe expand once, the building is finished and everything is happening, that maybe they can expand. So I'm thrilled that this now is also being used as a model, and I know that we have discussed this even with the Purple Line coming through, that the state should look at this particular project or initiative as a model, because there's always that issue of, do you revitalize and redevelop, but then do you push businesses out? And it's not a perfect science, but I think this has been a really good experiment regarding that. So I appreciate the fact that the executive has sent this forth, and Mr. Stone, I know, has been doing a lot of work, and I appreciate how you have been able to tell us exactly where we're going. So I just, want to thank the committee for positively
So you're
reacting to
suggesting
this.
a discussion where we look specifically at,
I think it would be great to understand how the
Fees work.
how the technical assistance has worked hand in hand with the, financial disbursement, because the idea was definitely to not only, of course, businesses need capital to ride through difficult times, but also they need technical assistance to either stabilize the business or, position the business for expansion. And at this point, given that we're a year out before everything opens, it would be great to kind of understand how that is working.
the relative impact of the technical assistance? Because didn't we just expand the technical assistance that we're providing in Silver Spring related to the Purple Line?
I believe you're referring to the Impact Assistance Fund, which is a separate fund. In terms of the technical assistance for the Small Business Assistance Program, that funding is currently done through the Incubator NDA, and it's a separate contract that the Department of Finance manages to make sure that the services provided to these businesses are aligned with the financial assistance, et cetera.
And just a point of clarification too, so the Small Business Assistance Program, the way it was set up, requires the companies to take part in technical assistance. The Impact Assistance Fund says technical assistance is available, but it's not required to receive funding. So the Small Business Assistance Program was specifically set up so that companies are required to participate in technical assistance training in order to receive any of the financial support. And the Impact Assistance Fund, which is Silver Spring, downtown Bethesda, and Clarksburg, it's available. It's known that technical assistance is available to companies, but it's not a requirement. So that's one of the differences between the two programs.
The other issue with Wheaton that I also like to understand when you have this session are the businesses outside the so-called donut, and how they're doing, and how are we dealing with the issue of technical assistance also, and just an evaluation to see if they need some financial assistance. We want it to be much more geographically concentrated, but obviously we have gotten some feedback that they might need some help as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. We will, let's follow up, Gene, about a few.
Sure, and I'll also speak with finance to figure out a good time for LEDC to make that work.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Andrew.
Thank you for that. I gave the council president credit for the last one as a co-sponsor. I need to make sure I give full credit, where it's certainly due. Here, obviously, this is a program that's working, and so credit to you for pioneering. And I just want to piggyback off of your comments about using it as a model, because I actually think that there are significant other opportunities, and as Councilmember Jawanda was mentioning as well, with the Purple Line, with huge projects like Marriott and Bethesda that have had significant impacts on some of the small businesses there, with the major construction impacts that have really impacted that community. But the entire Purple Line corridor, I think it would be helpful to think about how we have a briefing discussing that, of when it's appropriate to initiate a program like this, what it would look like, whether or not we can initiate our state partners to maybe be partners in this. Maybe it's some from the county and some from the state, and we have a joint program on joint projects like the Purple Line and others like Marriott, frankly, which is getting significant county and state support and is one of the chief economic development priorities of both the county and the state, but has had a significant impact on the day-to-day business operations of some of the small retailers, restaurants, et cetera, just like in Wheaton. So I don't think it's the same conversation, but I think separately another follow-up. I'd love if you're interested, Mr. Chairman. I think that it would be nice to have that broader discussion at a later date to see how we can take this good idea that's clearly working and figure out how we can spread it around to other areas and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in terms of how we do it.
All right.
Can I just add something?
Sure.
No, that's a great idea. To be honest, I mean, when we, worked on this bill in 2012, that was part of the intent, was to see how this could work and then use it as that model. And I know that, former Executive Leggett, when we had the big meeting in College Park, actually University of Maryland, regarding a Purple Line, the community impact meeting, he actually mentioned this. This was presented as an option. And so we've had those conversations already, and I think it is great. I mean, the Silver Spring model is it's loosely based on this, obviously, but there is no doubt that this can become a really important, template. So it's, the more that we can evaluate how it's been implemented in Wheaton and to, then do a post-evaluation to see where the businesses are, that's really great information to then create, a very robust template that can be adapted if needed, but certainly it has been discussed in the context of the Purple Line, and the state just didn't really want to participate. So that was kind of the question, do we then have to foot the bill, and that's not fair. But having another conversation now, I think would be really awesome.
Could I ask one technical question quickly? Mm-hmm. So the one question I had was about the $100,000 for EDF expenditures. I know it's probably exceedingly rare in this case that there would be a single request that exceeds 100,000 now that it's been lifted to 125,000. It seems to me that these are 16,000, 20,000, 25,000, and then they cap out. They're multiple, but there could be a scenario now that we've lifted, now that we're proposing lifting the cap where somebody could wait because it doesn't seem like there's any statute of limitations on when they incur the expense to when they request the reimbursement from the fund. And so in that case, would there have to be a specific notification to the council just like any other EDF? I know you discussed it as a broader, using this as one, one expenditure of the EDF, but in the case of an individual business requesting more than 100,000 for an individual request, how would that be treated in terms of the law and the EDF requirements?
I would have to be a case by case, but I would assume, given how the law is written, that outside of what staff has mentioned for the Small Business Assistance Program, if one business, say under, we'll use the Impact Assistance Fund, which I know that technically the maximum requirement there is 25,000, but just as an example, I would expect if a business was going to receive more than $100,000, we would be notified in some manner since we haven't had a discussion about it. Because that's how the law is written. It requires, the council requires notification if the executive plans to offer more than $100,000 to any one business. And as staff points out, it's not just a one-time offer, it's a lifetime offer. So if one business receives 4 $25,000 offers, is how the council in previous years has approached that process. They want to know if we're continually giving businesses more and more money.
Right. Is that consistent with how finance sees it?
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Good. So the committee is on board, 3-0. Yep. Thank you, Lori.
And then staff will note that this will go to full council July 23rd.
Okay. All right, now we're going to move to an update on White Oak, and we are going to learn about what's happening there. We're going to take this in 2 phases. We've got one that is sort of everything but Viva White Oak, and then we're going to do Viva White Oak. And I think the idea here is for us to focus on ways that the council can really enhance the success of the private sector's initiatives and the county's initiatives there. Very broadly, we're trying to grapple with the fact that for many, many years, the whole East County was shut down in a development moratorium, and as a result, it fed a boom in Howard County and created a lot of problems for Montgomery County. And today, we're still trying to dig out from that legacy of anti-business mentality that has really ensured that there was no commercial center arising other than FDA, generally speaking, in the East County, north of Silver Spring, east of Silver Spring. So we have a vision for creating a new development center and creating momentum and bringing investment in companies to capitalize on the proximity of FDA, and ideally to create, among other things, a bio hub in this part of the county. And so with that, we thought we would we're going to review White Flint separately, and we're two areas of great interest, White Flint and White Oak. So we'll start with White Oak today. And Jean, why don't you tell us about the packet or anything you want to say there?
Sure. No, I'll keep it brief since we have a lot of presenters today. We'll have 3 presentations. We'll do them in segments so that the committee members and the council president can focus on each of them rather than in kind of like cross-pollinating there. But hopefully, as the staff packet notes, I mean, the council undertook a large effort to see this area transformed over the last decade. And as I note, master plans take time to come to fruition. And so as the chair noted, I mean, this is a kind of a check-in point to kind of see where we're at after several years. So the first part will be, and if there, I don't know if Mr. Fossman, if there's any planning staff here, there were going to be some planning staff available, will be just about the general update of development in the area. And then Mr. Jen from the Global Lifestyle Development Corporation will give us an update about Viva White Oak as the second part. And then the third part will include the Montgomery County Development Economic Development Corporation and other executive staff, and then also folks from the Friends of White Oak to give us a general community engagement placemaking update as well as business marketing. So as I said, staff will keep it brief since we have a lot of presentations. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fosselman if there's no other comments from the committee for him to go through his presentation.
And I'll note there is a memo, Circle 26 describes the EDC's effort in White Oak, and Circle 23 is from Global Life Side describing their current efforts in White Oak. All right, Mayor Pete, number 2. Number one. I forgot, for us, you're number 1.
MP1, MP2. So good morning, committee members and President Navarro. Thank you for having us up here. This is our 3rd time giving an update to the county council members. I want to first start by thanking a few people. One is one of my closest team members, who is Drew Bonde, who is, director of the Regional Services Center for East County. He has been a great partner through this process over the last 3 years. The second is the Friends of White Oak, who have been extremely engaged in community building, and you'll hear from them shortly about engagement, marketing, and placemaking. And then the last are our friends over at LabQuest, who really planted the seed for bringing the FDA here to Montgomery County over 2 decades ago, and they've also been a great partner to work with. So you know how we're going to go through this today in 3 different areas, and there are several people here. The first section is going to be a PowerPoint that we're going to go over, and my colleagues Patrick Butler and Luis Estrada are here, who will pop up should you ask any questions that require intelligence to respond to. They will be up. So we all know where White Oak is on the east side of the county. Go to this second. This one. Left one. There. Thank you. It's 3,000 acres roughly. It's bordered by Prince George's County on the east, Cherry Hill Road to the north, Route 29 to the west, and then down to where Lockwood is, and in between that cuts New Hampshire Avenue, Route 650. And the 3 major areas are the BioLife Sciences, where Viva White Oak is, Adventist Hospital, down in the White Oak section where the White Oak Shopping Center is, and then down into Hillendale, where Hillendale Center and several other organizations such as the Union College and now the Amalgamated Transit Center are there. So if you look at this key here, the projects that are completed are in sort of the brick orange color. The one that's completed and opened a couple months ago is the Hilton Hotel. I understand that they are almost always booked. It's extremely successful. And that's something that was needed amenity-wise to the community, to have a hotel like that that's affordable, yet very modern and conducive to the needs of the community. The second section of the key, the purple, is anything that's being permitted or under construction. Next is anything that's with our folks at the planning department. And then the last sort of darker blue are things that are going to be happening in the future, which are primarily 4 aging shopping centers. And I'll go through this very quickly. We all know about the FDA, which is located right in the center of White Oak. And this is a picture of their concept campus. They're currently expanding as they consolidate their headquarters here in White Oak. Their status is that their plan it was approved for the migration plan, which is part of their movement and consolidation. It sits on 600 acres, but they really only use about 130 of the acres, which is the part that's up against New Hampshire Avenue. 6 million square feet of construction. The current personnel is just under 11,000, but by 2038, their personnel should rise to about 18,000 people. Our next project is Viva White Oak, which is the second largest product in the area, and it is between the Paint Branch Stream and the new Adventist Hospital. Mr. Jen is here to address the progress that they're making, and so I won't get into that too much. This is just one of the older concept drawings of Viva White Oak, and some of the renderings. The status of that is the developers working on infrastructure, environmental mitigation, and development building recruitment. I'll again let Mr. Jen get into that. It is zoned mixed use. It's going to be roughly 7 million square feet of commercial, roughly 5,500 residents, and then a 4-acre public school site has been set aside. Next is the Adventist White Oak Medical Center, which is opening on August 25th. We took a tour of that last week. It's very exciting. I know some of you have also been in it. If you have not, I encourage you to do it. It is an amazing state-of-the-art facility that will be very welcome to the East County. They have 803,000 square feet, and they are sitting on 48 acres on a beautiful campus. They are wrapping up some work with DOT, the DPS on occupancy, and they are scheduled, as I said, to open on August 25th. That's going to be quite an undertaking. They're going to do it in one day from moving from the Tacoma Park campus to their new White Oak campus. They're coordinating with the state police and our county police to make sure this gets done. Our next project is Hillendale Gateway. That is down at the intersection of 495 and New Hampshire Avenue. The shopping center with the Safeway is there and the Starbucks. And that project is, they're under final design and they're working with the planning department. This is one of the renderings. It's an extremely mixed-use community, and it's also a partnership with the Housing Opportunities Commission. They're replacing 96 affordable housing units that are age-restricted and replacing them with over 150. So this joint venture will continue through the process, and the units will be mixed in. There'll be some market rate units as well that will be rentals. It will be a zero net energy facility, which means it's higher than LEED certified. They're using a European model, I believe, for the standards. It'll be roughly 25 to 30,000 square feet of retail space on the lower level, including a detached drive-through. It's no secret now, it'll be detached drive-through Starbucks. They will be keeping the Starbucks across the street because New Hampshire Avenue can command that market to do so. Also, there'll be 350 units of the market value, and then there'll be some office space, which is that center building, I believe is about 7,000 square feet of commercial office space.
Remind me, it says ATU campus, that's referring to the part that's not on the screen, basically?
Yes, Chairman. It's the far to the right is the Amalgamated Transit Union, formerly the Union College. I think that's about 45 acres. They have a beautiful, very modern conference center there, and they are trying to market that for more people from the public to use it. They're renovating the old dorm rooms into 4-star hotel rooms. They're doing an indoor swimming pool, and it's definitely going to be a great
market as a conference center generally
for the public.
for the public.
But of course, their primary use would be for their members of the union, but it also has several openings during the year. The conference center holds about 600 people. So it's a smaller version of the one that we have in North Bethesda, but it's just as nice, and you can do catering and so forth. Next is the town center. So we jump back up to Route 29 at the intersection of Tech and Industrial, right where the MDA's emissions testing center is. And this is also another mixed-use development. Currently, they're working with DOT and the planning staff on some final designs of the intersection. It'll be roughly 57,000 square feet of retail. There'll be a grocery store. It's also no secret that it will be a Trader Joe's. And they're very excited. There's a Trader Joe's there now in White Oak that's at the intersection of Lockwood, and they will be moving. This store is roughly 3 times the size of the one that they have down at Lockwood. The Lockwood will relocate to this one, and the owners of the Lockwood center are working to find a replacement, and we are working with them, as well as I've consulted some folks at the Economic Development Corporation on how to maybe recruit some people.
And who owns this site?
This is owned by Finmark. Yeah. And also there'll be 225 residential rental units.
And is the MVA being displaced, or?
No. The MVA is across the street. This is on the north side of industrial. The MVA is on the south side.
I'll ask that. Keep going.
So next is the Home 2 Suites, which is that Hilton I spoke about. It has been open about 2 months. It's back down by 495 in New Hampshire, across the street. It's on Elkton Drive, across from that Safeway shopping center. It is a 100-room hotel. They have 62,000 square feet. There's an indoor pool, and as I said, they are almost fully booked all the time. They also did some special things at this Hilton. They had to get permission from the headquarters of Hilton Corporation, just some details on the outside of the building. They also increased the amount of conference room space, because they feel that with the FDA and the transit union there and other small businesses, they're going to need conference space use. So they were given permission to do that. So it's a little bit different from the other Home 2 Suites. So the next thing on our, whoops, there's a rendering. I forgot to show you that. The next item are that there are 4 aging shopping centers in White Oak that have also been rezoned to mixed use, and their owners are watching to see how these other projects move forward, and will most likely renovate these. These include the Hillendale Shopping Center down off of New Hampshire Avenue, where the Safeway is, the Orchard Shopping Center, where the Target is, off of Cherry Hill Road. The other Hillendale, I actually don't know the name of that center. Someone said it was just the Hillendale Center, that is right across the street from Powder Mill Road. It's also an aging shopping center that the owners are watching. And then the last is the one that we all know about, is the White Oak Shopping Center, where the Sears is. So they're watching carefully. Some have talked about not necessarily tearing down the existing centers, more revitalizing them and then doing infill, like maybe some townhomes or some structured parking with some multifamily units for rental or condos. So these are just a few of the highlights of some of the marketing, outreaching, and placemaking that we've done. But we started with an Urban Land Institute study, and these are just some of the highlights that you can see up there. And this is just to sort of give us some guidance after the master plan was finished and how to move forward and get some list of professionals' opinions on how to do this. One of the things was to convene a group that would advocate for White Oak, and so we did, and called it Friends of White Oak. Creating an internal working group, we have that team. We're actually sort of juggling that a little bit now that we have a new administration, but we'll be getting that back in place. And then engaging business and property owners in aesthetics and appearance with cleanups and so forth. And then the last thing we were charged with creating a professional marketing plan, which you have seen, and we just finished that this year. These are just some examples of different pieces of marketing that either the Economic Development Corporation did, the Executive's Office did, or Department of Transportation did, and they're just different, and county stat as well. They're different pieces that are handouts, or you can access them online to give information for White Oak. And of course, we have social media presence. These are just a few snapshots and examples of some of the events that we've done in engaging the community, the cleanup days, the bus rapid transit kickoff. We've had several meetings with community members, residents. We had a specific one with just the businesses. We had about 45 people participate. Of course, the White Oak Day is held at the Rec Center every year. And then Drew's had several hiring events, working with the different businesses like Adventist, and he will be working with the folks at Viva as they move forward, and others. And then, of course, National Night Out is always a big event. Yes, did mention the environmental tour, which was fascinating too. We went down into the Paint Branch stream area and learned all about what's happening down in there. And that's one of the most important aspects of White Oak, that environmental section of it. It needs to be kept in place and protected through the construction process. Little bit on the structure of the Friends of White Oak. This is sort of how we formed them. It was Mr. Leggett's idea to put this together. The board members' names are down there. You can see they are from a diverse group of areas within the White Oak. Everyone either has to own a business in White Oak, live in White Oak, or work in White Oak, or own property. And some of the members are here, and you'll be hearing from them shortly. This is just a priority exercise that we did this year on what we should focus on for the Friends of White Oak, and of course the master plan came out at the top. The second, third, and fourth are activities to create a sense of place, the transportation network, and then more amenities for the community, and you can see the rest for yourselves. They were rated by the board members. We had a professional who's also a board member, Dave Feehan, walk us through this 2-hour exercise. And then next are just ways to stay in the know. This particular PowerPoint is actually a lot larger. I use this to speak to homeowners associations, business associations, and so you all know how to get a hold of me, but they may not. And so these are some of the examples that we use. We have the newsletter, we have the website, we have the Facebook page, and of course there's always email and telephone. And that wraps up my presentation.
All right. So, Gene, what you suggested is that we talk about development not including Viva White Oak, and then we'll just do a focused conversation on Viva White Oak, and then we'll come back to a marketing conversation?
Correct. Given that the master plan gives a runway for development to occur, we thought it'd be good to see from Mr. Fosselman and others where that's at. Staff will also note, sometimes oft forgot, is that the Army Research Laboratory, although technically in Prince George's County, is partly also in Montgomery County here, and is a very large federal presence. And so that's just one important note. But for now, I thought we could focus on the development side of things. The marketing and placemaking, although Mr. Fosselman touched on at the end, was more of the third part, the third leg of today.
So, BF Saul and the White Oak Shopping Center, you've described many of those property owners as sort of watching and waiting. Tell us a little more.
Well, I think they are, I don't think, they are, they're watching to see the progress. Adventist Hospital is about to open, and as I said, the hotel is open. Adventist is not the typical business because it's a hospital, but I think when you start to see some things moving with the town center, off of 29, and then the Hillendale Gateway, those two projects are key to making White Oak successful. They have to happen. They have to move forward. And they're a little bit more easier to make happen than a large project like Viva, which is going to take a little bit longer, but it's certainly going to happen as well. And I think once you see the town center and Hillendale Gateway start, you're going to start to see those 4 shopping center owners approach us about doing projects.
So the town center is the Trader Joe's, and there's more, well, it'll be a little more than a Trader Joe's. It's 57,000 square feet of retail, so Trader Joe's plus maybe 1 or 2 small stores?
Sure. There'll be some restaurant pads similar to where the Panera restaurant park is, of that caliber. There could be a couple of small retail shops, gift stores, clothing stores. There'll be possibly some office space on the second floor of the one detached building, and then the rest of it will be the 250 residential rental or condo units.
So that'll create kind of the gateway, and
you'll see that development as you drive through, and you'll be coming to the entrance of Viva White Oak off of Industrial. And then, of course, Hillendale Gateway would be the gateway if you're coming in off the Beltway onto New Hampshire Avenue. And that's also essential to happen.
okay. And then you mentioned the FDA expansion, so we know that they're going to be adding thousands of employees. What do we know about that? On campus, off campus? Are they leasing? Are they looking around the county? Are they really interested in the White Oak area?
Well, this is a done deal, Mr. Chair. They're coming. Have already started migrating the folks over there. They are first looking at where to place them in the existing space that they have. They've also looked at building additional buildings. There are some budget issues with the federal government, like all government budgets. And so there could be a possibility of building some structures adjacent to the FDA campus, and then they would lease there is funding to be leasing, but not necessarily building new structures. So that's, I really don't know a lot about that, to be honest, because they're sort of keeping that close to themselves. But they are coming. There's no doubt about it. They're coming and they're prepping for it. And they're also expanding their award-winning shuttle and commuter program that they use to almost be not even seen or affect the transportation or the commuting routes. It's almost seamless how they do it.
Okay, well, congratulations to Finmark and the Duffy Companies. I love what the Duffy Companies has done there. I think this new Hilton is really exciting, and the fact that we have the Gateway project across the street that's coming along, and you know, there's that part of the county is really going to pop. That gateway to White Oak is really going to pop very soon, and we do have that transportation project that we have. I think the executive branch has really dropped the ball on, frankly, and we discussed this at T&E, I think, or actually it was FED. It was with Glenn. It was as a follow-up on the SSP. Pete, is there any development on that specific project?
Could you elaborate on which, we have
This is
several
the
transportation projects.
New Hampshire Avenue, Powder Mill, the slip ramp,
Yes.
and there was a desire to go back to the drawing board and work on, Chris Conklin is here, who provided us with a lot of background last time and can do that.
Good morning. The follow-up study on that issue has been initiated. The traffic data collection was completed before school ended
Okay.
this spring, and we're working on that analysis now. So we should be coming to conclusion of that over the summer and into the fall to revisit whether or not that slip ramp is indeed a good idea to solve the congestion issues at Powder Mill or not.
Okay. You know, as I stated, I thought the slip ramp was a fine idea, and I disagreed with the decision to restudy it, but, you know, you've provided us with that update, so that's the status of that. Why don't we go to colleagues for questions, comments? Mr. Chawando.
Mr. Conklin, come on back up for 1 second.
Come on down.
You're the next contestant. Just sticking on transportation, I was going to ask that question, so I'm glad. So study's done, or
The data collection
is
was finished
done
before school ended. Otherwise, we would have a big delay waiting for it to get back in session.
Good. And then could you talk about, obviously, transportation is key to this whole thing here, and you know, those of us who live in that corridor and many of the residents and we're excited with BRT, and you know, I certainly have, you know, everyone wants their line to be next, but could you talk a little bit about that in relation, obviously 29 is going to have an impact, but you talk about New Hampshire and what the thinking is and the latest on
Sure.
either one of you, but I'm assuming you know the most.
Yes, the 29 project is under construction now. Most of the stations are in active construction. The scheduled operation date for that is next May. So we should see the service running there. In parallel, you may be aware, there's study of follow-on improvements that are being contemplated between Tech Road and downtown Silver Spring. That project is progressing well. We expect to have some results from that again later this summer, headed into the fall, about what type of additional improvements could be implemented to make 29 work better for transit and other users in that part of the corridor. New Hampshire Avenue is funded for study. I believe it's 21. I don't remember exactly when it's funded for study. So the work hasn't started on that yet, but we will be getting engaged with that as soon as the funding is available in the CIP to start that activity. And a couple other projects are also funded, but not in this part of the county.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And look forward to, I'm assuming T&E will take up these things and maybe we can sit in.
Well,
and, you know.
yeah, I'll follow up with Glenn. The
Okay.
implementation of some of the transportation elements of the master plan is really a FED.
Maybe we joint, but
I'll have to follow up with Glenn.
Yeah, and you may be aware of the local area transportation improvement program. That is where many of these are located. The slip ramp that's been discussed is a part of that program. There haven't been any payments into that fund yet, so that program hasn't advanced beyond the study of the Hillendale Gateway components.
okay. Thank you very much. Mayor Pete, good to see you. I was there when that picture was taken, so I was, Mayor Pete 1 and 2. The Adventist Hospital you mentioned, my staff recently did a tour, and I'm going to be going there, and that sounds like it's moving great. I can't wait for the opening. One thing that came up, there's a little pond right across on the Viva property there, adjacent. Is that the remediation of that land impact the hospital in any way? Do you know that area I'm talking about?
Well, there's a stormwater management facility that's been there for several decades that's on the Adventist property.
Right.
Maybe? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's adjacent to Viva.
Adjacent to Viva.
It's been dredged, cleaned up, and it's being, there's a nice wall there, and they're planting new trees, and they're doing a pedestrian pathway. It's going to become a public amenity. So not only may the patients use it, but you and I can drive, and literally someone asked this question the other night, park in the garage and walk around the path to exercise. It's also ADA accessible, which was quite the feat, because if you look at the topography, it's 35 feet high till you get down there. So they've done a nice job. So it's just a public amenity, and it'll be open.
Great. Okay, good. That's good to hear. You mentioned Trader Joe's. I'm very excited about that, but also concerned. I'm glad. Could you talk a little bit more about the efforts to make sure that the folks, there's obviously a housing right next to the current Trader Joe, and you've got other people there, about the efforts to recruit someone else to fill that space?
Sure. So that center has a BP gas station, a Chico's clothing store, a Starbucks coffee, yes, thank you, and the pet store, which is called Pecca, something.
California Tortilla.
Yes.
We
so
all.
they, yeah.
Been
So
to all of
they're,
them.
There from time to time.
yeah. So they are high quality retail areas, and the Trader Joe's complements them, or they complement Trader Joe's. So the group that recently bought the center is.
Who is that?
I knew you were going to ask that question. I should have. But it was Finmark that owned it, and they sold it to a different group. Regency is the managing company, so that's who I've been working with, is Regency. And we are going to be meeting to talk more about prospects and some ideas. And depending on where we go from there, we may actually ask the community what they'd like to see and do that type of, give them a say and empower them as to what might go there.
Okay, I think you definitely, that shouldn't be a maybe. I think we should definitely include community input on that. And that kind of leads to my next general question. In the budget process, we kind of punted on this, but we discussed the ability of you to be in two places at once. And, obviously the original idea was that White Oak would have a dedicated person, and obviously White Flint's a separate but equally important discussion. Is it still your view that you can manage both? Because I'm becoming increasingly concerned that there's so much going on in each place that it needs more dedicated attention.
Well, let's see. I'll say what I said before when we were looking at this position 3 or 4 months ago. At this time, I do not see a need to hire another person. I can manage it. It's a few more meetings. The schedules are not conflicting at the moment. A lot of morning meetings, a lot of evening meetings, a lot of weekend activities. But having worked full-time and been a mayor, I'm kind of used to that activity, so that's not an issue. However, as I noted before, I think the council should revisit in 6 months and see if things are still manageable. Now, I know that some folks on the council would like to see a full-time position for both. I'm just expressing my opinion as to the need. I don't disagree with hiring someone. There are certainly economic development needs in the county. Mr. Fletcher from the County Executive Office is here also to answer any details with what we're doing internally to discuss what the council wants us to do in terms of how to structure those new people.
Mr. Fletcher, do you have anything to add on that?
Of course.
Hello, good morning. And thank you, Pete, for that response. What I would like to add is that we did get the council mandate in the budget to add the halftime FTE to make it a full-time. That right now would leave it at 1.5 FTE to service both areas. We're in the process now of determining the job description and the process of following the council's mandate of adding it to the budget so that we will include the other halftime FTE. The challenge is figuring out what does that mean as it relates to hiring someone new, how Pete's time is currently split, and making that adjustment to make sure that both areas are serviced properly.
Okay, all right. Well, please keep us posted, and a timeline. Do you have a sense of a timeline on that?
Soon, but we are, it's what Pete alluded to was that, we're really trying to make sure that with all the other economic development efforts that we have going on, that we do it in a very holistic way and not just kind of put different pieces in together without a plan, so to speak. So it should all come together, and we should all be able to make sure that we update you as soon as that happens.
I think the needs are intensive. There's a lot going on, a lot of balls in the air. There's a lot of things. You could almost spend most of your time on even one segment of this project. We haven't even talked about Viva White Oak yet, and so I just would urge us to really move that forward. Thank you for the response. The other thing and I want to make sure you're factoring in, I know the Collaboration Council is in discussions, my understanding, on Tech Road to lease property or to build a youth drop-in center. Are you aware of that?
I am not.
Okay, well, you should be aware of that, and Jeru, and I hope you're aware of it, because it's a big, expensive endeavor needed, but something that Jeru, do you want to come and say something on that? But I just want to make sure that's an example of the type of complementary and important, because part of that would be getting kids, particularly our disconnected youth in that area, connected to resources and potentially employment. And so I just think it's a part of the greater mix that needs to be factored into the overall plan. Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning. Jeru Bandit, Regional Director. Yes, we are working with Terrell and Elijah from the Collaboration Council in terms of relocating the disconnected youth center in that area. Along with that, we are also hopefully welcoming Mana Food at Tech Road, US 29 this week, actually. So there's a lot of stuff going on in there. In terms of the community engagement, they are part of the East County Services Network, along with a number of other nonprofits who are actually having their presence more pronounced in East County.
That's great. Thank you. And we want to tie all that together. So thank you very much.
So this area is an opportunity zone. It's the same boundary as we see generally in orange on the maps you've shown us, right, Gene?
I'd have to get back to you on that because it's based on census tract and the master plan is based on other geographic boundaries.
Okay, it might be a little different. I mean, my overall analysis here would be that the private sector is not really making any big moves yet. We've had some very targeted investments by the Duffy companies, in what is really very proximate to the Beltway, and they've done a great job and they're succeeding. But when you look at the whole area, it's terrific that Trader Joe's is coming in. We've got Finmark with that, very targeted, frankly, which is a relocation, to perhaps an easier and expanded footprint for them. So may not be a huge risk for them to take, really, in the first place. I think we've got a problem with capital taking a risk in this part of the county, and the White Oak Shopping Center should be a premier location for investment. It's right at the juncture of two of the biggest highways in the county, and yet they're just watching and waiting. And we've got thousands of employees that have relocated to FDA. We've got thousands more that are hopefully going to be added to that mix, and yet there's really not much of a effort to build on that. And we saw from the equity analysis, actually, we were presented with data about demographic trends, and in fact, the share of the population that is in poverty in this part of the county has risen substantially over the last 15 years. So the overall trends, are challenging, and I think we need to think bigger about, and that's what the whole White Oak Master Plan is about, fundamentally, is thinking bigger about how to bring private sector investment. But I just think it's really incongruous that we could have such a large employer, FDA, expanding there, and yet
really, even across the street, the Strip Center, that one that we don't know the name of, maybe it's the Hillendale Center, frankly, doesn't look any different than, it has for the last 25 years. So I think we've got to do a lot more. Hopefully the 29, the 29 flash is going to be an incremental improvement, and Trader Joe's succeeding might catalyze some more, and when the hospital opens. But I think the big picture is still the government is the primary mover here. The private sector is not yet in a lead role, and we need to figure out why and what can we do to try to improve that dynamic. Council President Nancy Navarro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate those comments. I'm really happy that now I have a neighbor, Councilmember Jawando, because I used to say that I was the only one who lived close to this particular area. One of my, I think, most important decisions when I first joined the council was definitely to add this to the work plan of the planning board because of everything that had been already, identified as missing. So I am very anxious, I guess, or I guess worried about the pace of progress here. People have been waiting for a very, very long time. And I don't know, Mr. Smith, if maybe you can, develop some recommendations for us. But now that we are, halfway through a year of a new administration, I think it's time to decide how we're going to recommit to this particular endeavor. It is very true that, we've got all these assets and all these conditions, but for some reason, it's just kind of like sort of still not totally there. I will also add that for the rating agencies, the fact that we do have these master plans and these revitalization projects or redevelopment projects in these parts of the county was of great interest to them because they wanted to understand how we were expanding our tax base throughout the county. So it was great to point to that, but that was like 5 years ago, that we began saying that. And we need to go back and be able to show what it is that we have actually produced. So I do believe that given the fact that there was not much there, that we have made some progress. I will agree with that. But we must, I think, just, feel the pressure to see how we can, motivate private investment. And we really do need to also come together as a team, right? So, we have the Economic Development Corporation, and I remember hearing at one of our briefings that they don't necessarily identify geographic areas for companies to go to when they're trying to. Well, I think we need to change that. I think that we need to be able to present the assets that we have and strongly encourage companies to consider all parts of the county and see what incentives we can provide if it's an opportunity zone specifically to begin to just, spark that. So I feel like there's just so much, but the commitment, we've got to recommit to that. I wanted to specifically also talk a little bit about kind of like Colesville, so because the strip of Colesville on New Hampshire Avenue was not part of the boundaries of the master plan, one of the things I did was to work with the HCA to put together a facade improvement. We also improved lighting on New Hampshire Avenue. But for example, the Meadowwood Shopping Center, which doesn't appear in your presentation, that's part of this whole entire area. And so I would like for us to, for the HCA and for you to also reach out to those owners and talk to the HCA to see where we are with that facade improvement, because we can't just carve out certain areas and then leave some other areas kind of, languishing there. That would be really important. The White Oak Library Refresh was part of that as well, is to make that a very attractive area. So I would love for us to work together. The regional services centers also play a very, important role. And so the positions that we added during the budget, those need to get incorporated in some way to see how we can boost this effort. So we've got all the components and all the pieces in place. I hope that this session serves as a sort of recommitment to we have to prioritize this. And I'll go back to that conversation with the rating agencies, that we do focus a lot on our already identified economic activity centers at the peril of so many other areas of the county. That's a huge mistake. So, I look forward to hearing where we are with Viva White Oak. I am at the shopping center where the Trader Joe's is probably 4 times a week because I go to Blue Heron. And I got to tell you, it's so stressful because there's a lot of people trying to, I have my strategy depending on the hour that I get there. So a larger, parking spot for Trader Joe's is going to be welcomed by many people. And who knows, maybe Blue Heron just expands as well because, they've been trying to do that. So what I'm trying to say is that we have the market segment. We have, plenty of people that live in this part of the county that have money to spend, but there continues to be that disconnect where there's always this stereotype that somehow, well, we don't know if it's, conducive to higher end, amenities or whatever, and people are going elsewhere. So we have to stop that. That leads to jobs for people who live there. It leads to opportunities for young people who live there. It leads, for people to consider that part of the county to maybe buy their first home. I mean, there's just so much wrapped into all of this that I just want us to recommit. So I'm all about how do we get it done. And if, Jean, if there are things that you think that council can begin to also explore as ways to just boost, we've gotten to this particular phase of everything. I would want to know what we can do to incentivize and move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
I did just want to correct, I found that the New Hampshire Avenue BRT is planned for 2022, not 2021.
We're going to move to the, right. We're going to move to the Global Life Side presentation, but to the Council President's comments, I totally agree. I put the issue out there of the opportunity zones. We're going to, our next PHED Business Roundtable session is going to focus on opportunity zones. White Oak is an opportunity zone. Montgomery Village is an opportunity zone. There's a lot of areas in the county that are not enterprise zones that are really seeking private investment, and the private sector, is on the verge of an investment, but that hasn't broken through yet. And so I think there's some more incentives that we could look at there, and I'm working on that with my staff. I'd be delighted to share that with you, and we could talk about that together. So now we'll have a presentation from Jonathan Jen from the Global Lifeside Development Corporation. Jonathan has been working to market this opportunity to investors around the world, and we've got a lot riding on the success of your strategy. So we're hopeful. Let's hear what you have cooking. What's in that oven there, Jonathan Jen?
Thank you very much, Chair Reamer. Jonathan Jen with Global Lifeside Development Corporation, and Jean had requested that I put together a little memo, which is in the package, sort of answering a couple of 3 core questions of what's the status of things now, the remainder of this year, going into next year, and then the phasing and the like. And that's in the package, and I'm happy to go into that detail, and I think is circled 23, 24, and 25 of the packet. Good morning. First, I want to thank the council for, I guess chronologically, the full council ratifying the commitment of the council to White Oak when we were going through the CIP process. I can't thank you enough for that. It was something that literally we took to commercial users at the Las Vegas ICSC and to the International Bio Conference that was in Philadelphia in June, and it was very well received, and it was very timely because there were a number of capital investors who were excited about Viva White Oak, but concerned that there was a message being sent with the CIP deferring for 3, 4, 5 years the county's commitment, and what the council said at the session and that resolution really was helpful. So I can't thank you enough for that. I guess in reverse chronological order, because that's recent, also thanking the council for the stewardship. As Council President mentioned, when in her first term, she was really the strong advocate for the vision, and ever since through. So thank you to the council, and As Mr. Fosselman said, we have lots of thanks to the community, and the community also sends a very strong signal to the capital markets. And we had a community organization, LabQuest, for the last quarter century that's been tirelessly working on the vision and how to put all this together. And so I don't think anyone can thank LabQuest enough. I'm sure the FDA would say they thank LabQuest, the GSA thanks LabQuest, the state, the county, the private sector in the area can't thank LabQuest enough. And appreciate the fact that the Friends of White Oak also are broadening the scope of the community engagement and support for it. As Chair Reamer mentioned, we've literally been, since 11 years ago is when the RFP came out for Site 2 in 2008. And ever since then, we've been traveling the globe, literally, telling the story of White Oak. People didn't know about White Oak. Now White Oak is on, at least in the biomedical innovation hub world, White Oak, Maryland is on the global map. We were even featured as one of the global innovation hubs at the International Bio Conference in San Diego as one of the great emerging biotech quarters in the country. We were one of 7 in the U.S. and one of 30 worldwide featured. So I think the really good news is that with the support and capital investors love the idea that this community is really well represented by YIMBYs, that yes, we want to have these opportunities because, Chair Reamer, you mentioned at the outset of this conversation, this area has been in a 30-year legal and de facto moratorium. And we don't have the tax base and we don't have the job opportunities and the job growth really because of that. And we're trying to not just make an incremental change, but a transformational change. And we do have all the stars aligned to achieve that. So I think the good news is what our opportunities are. And the opportunities that we have in real life signed, executed NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, expressions of interest, letters of interest of worldwide names that want to come to White Oak because we were blessed with the good fortune of something that no other global innovation hub, biotech hub has, the FDA headquarters. It's the only one in the world. And we've had executives of internationally renowned biotech companies say their science clusters all around the country, but there's only one FDA in the world, and it's in White Oak. And its significance is not just local or even national. We comment about, of course, Montgomery County is blessed with so many assets in the biotech and healthcare. But if you look at them, the others, they all start with the letter N. The National Institutes of Health, and NIST, National Cancer Institute. FDA is international. And that's really what, when we get to what is White Oak and what can, in the branding ideas, we are an international biotech innovation hub. And as we know, 98% of the population of the world is outside the U.S. boundaries. And no matter where in the world the next great biotech innovation takes place, the only way it's going to get into the U.S. healthcare market, the most lucrative healthcare market in the world, is there's only one place and one way to do it, and that's at the FDA in White Oak. So that message is clearly getting out, and that's why we have these very serious expressions of interest. What we want to do is move all those expressions of interest and preliminary sets of interest in investing in White Oak to actually sign binding contracts. And that's wherein lies some of the challenge. Getting back to the opportunities, though, because I still to this day get people, even in the neighborhoods, whether it's in Burtonsville or wherever, have never even heard of the White Oak Science Gateway Master Plan or even heard of Viva White Oak, and they wanted to know a little bit about what this opportunity represents. And we had an RCLCO study done many years ago when we were starting out on this vision. And as you know, RCLCO was also the analyst who saw the prosperity that could come if we collectively, from the private and public sector and community, invest in downtown Silver Spring. They made that analysis of how 30 years ago, downtown Silver Spring could be transformed. They did the study of this and said the Viva White Oak development can bring over 10,000 new full-time direct jobs in the 280 some odd acres. Over 5,000 new induced full-time equivalent jobs, and about 5,000 temporary jobs, as they refer to them, the construction workers, to building a whole new township of 12 million square feet. Now, I sort of smiled when they said it's temporary jobs, but if we have a 10, 15-year build-out, to have 5,000 people over a 10, 15-year build-out really helps catalyze it. So those are the opportunities, which then also RCLCO said for Montgomery County, the net fiscal benefit, not the total, the net fiscal benefit after expenses is over $1.3 billion into Montgomery County's treasury over a 30-year bond period. It was the time. So it's 20,000 new jobs, $1.3 billion of net fiscal benefit to the county, which will help put some on the revenue side to help balance the budgets that I know you have to do on an annual basis. And more important, or I should say very importantly, the jobs are not one kind of job. If you imagine the vision is a mixed-use community where we have everything from the grocery store and the hotel and the shops and the restaurants, retail, as well as university and corporate offices. The job spectrum opportunities in this area ranges from the $15 plus an hour service worker who might work in the grocery store or the hotel or in the offices, and on up to the executive suites, which gives us a whole spectrum of new jobs in this area. And we need to be mindful of the fact, and this gets a little bit to what collectively the county can do along with the private sector in transforming an area. Over 20 years ago, the master plan for this area was to designate this an employment center. But a rezoning and designation and sprinkling the rezoning dust on it doesn't make it happen. And we have to look at what the challenges are. It's great that we have the zoning in place now to make a vibrant. What was the challenge of the last master plan of the employment center was it was really taking the existing industrial park and saying, well, let's just expand it and maybe have some biotech uses in it. But those are 9 to 5, 5 day a week kind of industrial park uses. The whole vision here is to make this a morning, noon, and night, have a nighttime economy, activity on the weekends, transforming the area from 40 hours a week of jobs and economic activity to 120 hours or plus by virtue of doing it. So all those things are in place. And in our going around, I want to emphasize that what we've done in the last 11 years is we've probably put in over $500,000 in pursuit of these biotech companies, international universities and researchers and R&D and everything else. So I want you to know that that's what we've invested in the 11 years. And we haven't, for those in the community who have characterize this, well, this is just going to be another residential project. Far from it. We've put over $500,000 into looking for those jobs, the biotech, the whole spectrum, and we haven't spent $1 on residential. Now, residential is going to be an important component of it, but we know that there's demand for residential in the area that helps create the weekend and evening activities to support the restaurants and the amenities we have. But I want you to know that what our singular focus has been is bringing this. And the important part also, what we're doing now is trying to get those anchors, those name anchors that will help make this a premium brand global innovation hub. So that's a much harder challenge to elevate the bar instead of doing it incrementally. But it's important that we do that. One of the reasons why is because one of the key goals that we have is to create a very robust velocity for community benefits and the whole range of things, whether it's helping people getting jobs or making micro loans for businesses that want to get started with the areas and all these various community benefits. One of the advantages of getting a biotech company or a commercial group that will put a headquarters here, as we all know, the people, when they have a headquarters at a location, they invest in the community, as opposed to maybe satellites or smaller offices. So those are some of the goals that we're trying to do. The challenge is really the historical disinvestment in this area puts us at a really competitive, challenged environment. We don't have the tax base, we don't have the job growth, we don't have that ability. So one of getting from NDAs and MOUs and LOIs, which are all the preliminary, I hate using just acronyms, but all these initial things, to actual signed binding contracts where people are ready to invest and get the capital investors it's not penciling out. Meaning that it's not financially viable for these companies to come in. And so what we need to do is figure out what's the recipe for us to make it help pencil out. And
when you say that, what do you mean? The commercial projects? What do you?
Well, primarily the commercial projects are what we're focused on initially. If we're going to brand this and elevate this, we need the name brands of the commercial, the biotech, the grocery stores, and those kinds of facilities. They're the ones that need to have this pencil out.
The rent that you think you can secure is not sufficient to.
Correct. And we have, it's not, there's some, as I say, great unique opportunities, but they're unique challenges. One of the unique challenges we have under the Montgomery County subdivision staging policy and tax structure is that if you're in the center of Montgomery County and someone says, well, I can't go directly there, but I can want to go a couple miles within that area, you're still in Montgomery County. The challenge we have is that you can go a mile away and you're Prince George's County. You can go 3.5, 4 miles away and you're Howard County. So when we're talking to people to come to this area and there is a subdivision staging or impact surtax that is on the sort of the bounty on the shoulders of the White Oak area, people can go into Calverton and avoid that, and to Beltsville and avoid that. They can go to Howard County and avoid it. And really, once we have that flash down there, it's easy for them to access the area. So we do have those kinds of financial challenges. The rents don't, as I'm sure you know, the grocery store tenant, the hotel, conference center, the commercial, the biotech, they all, when it comes down to what can they afford, they back into what the rentals are, what the costs are, and it's a much lower cost base than elsewhere in the county. So I don't have right now what that recipe is. We're somewhat half-baked in dealing with these key initial anchors that establish what the branding is. But that's sort of the homework assignment. We've asked those who are under these written agreements, preliminary expressions of interest, well, tell us what that package is. What will be the full recipe to reduce the impediments to coming here? And I'm hopeful that we're going to get to that. Now, I also want to talk about some of the good news that I think can come into play in this unique set of circumstances, unique opportunities, and the unique challenges. I think the good news is, and Chair Reamer, you touched on this, is that we've now been fortunately designated a federal opportunity zone. That has meaning in terms of those companies trying to pencil out. People don't quite know how to quantify that yet, but that is one way to leverage what I think we're going to need to have in the recipe. The private sector is going to have to make the contributions. The county, I think the state and the federal. The federal in terms of the opportunity zone at a minimum. The state, as we know, has an Opportunity Zone Commission that's weighing how can, and Maryland is one of the leading states on the idea of how the state is going to try to create a multiplier incentive package for opportunity zones. And if we add in the county, looking at the ways in which to catalyze unique areas under unique set of circumstances and overcome sort of the historic disinvestment, coupled with what I'm very fortunate to have spent 30 years working with not only one of the great corporate citizens in Montgomery County, but one of the most philanthropic families who see this as a legacy project. And we need to focus on this as the ways in which, as a legacy, we can leave all that behind. I would say that, and I've analogized this in a couple of different settings, we can imagine the elite universities get applications from some of the most talented students from all socioeconomic backgrounds. They have to have a scholarship program for those who may come from a lower socioeconomic, for that great talented student to go to that elite university and succeed and be a great graduate. I'd like to respectfully suggest that Viva White Oak is an incredibly talented, with great potential, that comes from a socioeconomic background because of the last 30 some odd years, that we need a scholarship program to get admitted to the elite Montgomery County development community. We cannot afford the full tuition that the subdivision staging policy represents, the impact tax policies represent, and those kinds of things. If you let us in, like those great students who sometimes get to go to the elite universities under a scholarship program, put us on a work-study program, we'll put the effort in. We can be one of those great graduates of the development process if we get a scholarship program. And that's my ask, that the council think about ways. Keep in mind, it's not just an academic exercise. RCLCO said that it was like over $2 billion of revenues, but after you put in the costs of doing of social programs, of everything on a township, it was still 1.3 billion net fiscal benefit to the county. So we have great opportunities. We have challenges, but I know we can overcome them. And what became very evident to us, and it actually came about when we signed our MOU with the commissioner of the FDA, and Commissioner Hamburg turned to us and said, our biggest challenge or responsibility will be to turn away people who will want to come to White Oak, who wouldn't contribute to the center of excellence that White Oak can become. And we have been faced with that. We've been approached by a number of organizations that want to come here, but they're not the right fit for a variety of reasons. They don't fit the vision.
Okay.
So we
I
want to do that.
want to get a chance to engage in the dialogue here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say before you wrap up?
One thing I want to say also, in keeping in mind about White Oak and what we're pursuing, is not a matter of in any way being competitive with other areas within Montgomery County at all. The people we're talking to are coming here not thinking about us versus another place in Montgomery County. It's usually we're competing against Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, California, Massachusetts. And only on occasion does someone say, well, if we don't go to Viva White Oak and we're thinking of Maryland, we may go to Frederick. But I want you to know that we don't believe that we should be slicing up and dividing up the Montgomery County pie. We need to be accretive in expanding the pie.
All right, thank you. So you have made it clear that you're in the stage of recruiting businesses, that there are some challenges to getting the investment that you need to move forward. We have flagged the issue of the opportunity zones. We're going to be discussing that at a future PHED meeting. And you've laid out in your memo some of the initial wins that you'd like to create there. So let's talk about all this. I'm going to go to Mr. Friedson, Mr. Joando, and then Council President.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the update. I've been listening attentively and trying to keep up. I mean, the good news is there's a lot going on. Obviously, there's tremendous opportunity. There are of course, challenges, and I'm glad the way you framed it, I think was a good way, the 30-year de facto moratorium, because some of the challenges that we face in the East County are self-imposed by decision-making that has taken place over the last several decades, and it demonstrates, I think, per the council's significant role in land use and economic development, this committee's role, that these decisions have long-lasting consequences in master plans and otherwise, and we pay the price or lack the opportunity to create jobs, create wages, create high-quality living environments, and that new homes and new businesses and new amenities are a positive, not just for the new people who are coming in, but for existing residents, and a lack of commitment to continuously driving new businesses and new housing and new amenities and keeping up creates not even a stagnation, but a falling behind. And it has long-lasting consequences for a lack of private sector investment, a lack of interest. Some of the comments that the council president made of a stigma and a thought about a community when it comes to who wants to live there, who wants to invest there, and whether or not it is top of mind. So I think this is great news. I think it's a reinforcement of us needing to recommit ourselves not just to the East County and not just to this particular project, but I think to these broader issues of being focused on forging ahead and on moving forward and on making sure that we're driving opportunities for private sector investment, making thoughtful public sector investments. And I think that there are few better examples of what happens when we don't and what can happen if we do than in White Oak. And so I think this conversation is an important one. And I think it's another important aspect of utilizing our core assets. I mean, we have some assets that nobody else in the world has, and you spoke about it here. Nobody else has what we have in White Oak, and nobody else has what we have in NIH, and nobody else has what we have in some of these other, NIST and some of the other things that you mentioned, and figuring out how we connect them to each other and connect them to the community and utilize them in order to get the private sector investment that we need. We can't rest on them being the job creators alone anymore. That was the model that worked 25 years ago and 50 years ago. It doesn't work anymore. We need them to be the pebble in the pond, and we need to help grow the ripples. And so I think that this is important, and I'm glad we've talked about opportunity zones, and I appreciate the fact that we've added that to the agenda, because I think there's tremendous opportunity. I've talked to folks recently. There's actually an opportunity zoned investment fund that was created in Montgomery County, and they're doing investments in other opportunity zones around the country. And I think we have failed to connect them and drive our investment. And this is just a broader economic challenge that we face, that we have lots of people with lots of interest in investment, and some of those investments from people here are happening in places elsewhere, and we need to drive it locally. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation, because I think it's very relevant to this one, and I'm hopeful that it helps to drive some of the and mitigate some of the challenges that you referred to, because I think it's not just about creating new programs, the new scholarship fund, I guess, so to speak, that you referenced, but I think there are programs that exist currently that we can do a better job, private and public, working together to utilize, that don't necessarily require huge new expenditures and commitments of county taxpayer dollars, but are programs that the county could help the private sector to utilize, and could be more of the convener than anything else. So I look forward to that. And question, speaking of the scholarship fund, we have a kind of an existing scholarship that the council president helped to recommit us to in a public way that you referenced earlier, that has been helpful. We have a $40 million commitment, and I just wanted to get a sense from that. You and I had talked privately about that, but I'm hopeful that you could share what your thought was in terms of the progress of where things stood, and when you thought that money, which is based on a match, for the millions listening at home, requires your investment to get a partial match of our investment up to the $40 million. When do you expect that to be needed and programmed, and what should we anticipate in terms of the progress that's being made with the project?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Councilmember Friedson. The expectation is that the 3 master plan roads, and what you're referencing is the $40 million contribution Montgomery County is going to make for the 3 master plan roads that actually go through Viva White Oak. Those are major public roads. And we think that, we don't have the final designs and final construction bid documents, but we think to put it into concept, we think that the range of the actual cost of those master plan roads is somewhere between $80 to $100 million that we would forward fund, and then put on a proportionate basis, Montgomery County would contribute it as the progress of that build-out is up, with a cap of $40 million. If it goes way above $100 million, that's all on our ticket. So that encourages us to make sure we're cost effective. I also want to mention that those master plan roads are not just roads. People think it's just what you see on the surface. It's everything that's below the road. So part of what we're doing is an integrated, ultra-high speed, ultra cyber secured broadband service that's appropriate for any of the biotech uses that we would have in the area. All the water, the sewer utilities, the electric, and all that stuff goes into those roads. Those roads need to be built and those utilities need to be installed for even the first buildings. So that's part of that. During the CIP program, I sort of mentioned, I think that we probably would only have a small amount of that $40 million that needs to be funded before next July. We're working on, because it's tied to the actual physical construction, we advance all the soft costs, the engineering, the approvals going through to get the permitting and the site plan approval and permitting. So I think that in the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, there's not much to do that.
How about 21 and 22? Because
yes,
we're now
that is
starting
going
the
to be
budget
big.
for the new CIP.
Right.
So for the following 2 years, this year is already budgeted, but for the next 2 years is the plan.
It's probably, I think we saw in the following year somewhere around $17 million of the 40, and the after that maybe 13 million, and then the balance in the year after that. I'll just note that even that is about 2 years behind what was the original CIP going back when we started on this. But a lot of it's because the time it's taken to get to this point. We're very close to actually being able to get on to Site 2. As you may know, the county needed to do its work on the Site 2 property, and we thought maybe by today we would be able to access it, but there's still a little lag. But within a short period of time, I think we will be able to get access to Site 2, which we have to do in order to get the, do the engineering. So I think those are among the things that.
You think about 3/4 of it will be the 2 fiscal years following this one, and then the balance.
At least,
FY23.
yes.
Okay.
And that's if everything goes on an orderly basis. The opportunity may actually be to accelerate that, because we have some of the people we're talking to, again, the good news is they want to go, and they want to go fast. And their biggest thing is we want to, be able to move into a building.
It's ambitious, but I like it.
Yeah, that's what we want, in which case we have to accelerate it. And we can work with the county on how to do that. We know we have to forward fund and get a reimbursement, but what we don't want to do is have such a disparity between when we have to forward fund, because that's how we tell our capital investors and lenders that they can get paid back.
Right. Okay, and then another specific question. Earlier, we were talking about the additional FDA. The FDA has on their campus the expected increase of what that redevelopment, re-envisioning of their property. And then my understanding has been that there are additional employees that they're expecting in terms of a consolidation to bring online that they won't have room for, and those folks have to go somewhere. And the question is where they will go and whether or not that's an opportunity for us in White Oak, whether on your property or another site close by.
What I understand is, well, first of all, the GSA went through its master plan process, and last December, they approved, actually, the National Capital Planning Commission approved the GSA's request to double the size, approximately, of FDA at White Oak to 18,000. That's
About
what.
10 now, it'll go to 18,000 employees, is that right?
Yes.
Right, give or take.
Give or take, yes. And so that's what's actually approved. Now, I think the federal government has to figure out, and part of that process was to see that all of the 8,000 to 10,000 new people that they're expecting could fit on the Federal Research Center property.
Right.
I think their next step that they have to look at is what's the timing requirements of the FDA, and how can they actually physically locate the employees in the time they have, and whether they can build it, and if so, can they get the appropriations? I think that's the process they're in now. One scenario was, as was approved, to build it on the Federal Research Center. One option that's always available to the GSA is to go out and seek RFPs for people to potentially build for the federal government if they don't have the appropriations. We don't know the answer to that, but if it turned out that, and that's something that happens all around the country, if it happens that GSA elects to go that route in the White Oak area, we sure want to be certain that we're prepared to respond to that. So that's yet another reason why we certainly want to be available, not just for the GSA, but also for these other big anchors we're trying to bring in. But the short answer to your question is, we don't know what the GSA wants to do, how they're going to do it. Part of the master plan process was the FDA has immediate needs to move 3,000 people there now, and in the foreseeable future, in the next 4 to 5 years, another 3,000, and they had the 3,000 more sort of reserved over the course of the next 10 years. But they have about 6,000 people they'd like to move to White Oak within a 4 or 5 year time frame, as I understood their breakdown of how they got to those numbers.
All right, we'll continue with questions. Will?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gang, good to see you. I appreciated when I don't know if it was I was elected or it was the primary. It all runs together, but I came and had a nice, good briefing with you and your team, and look forward to keeping in touch. A couple of specific questions, but one direction to staff. It would be helpful to me, and Andrew, before you walk out, to just get a timeline briefing. I want you to go, but I want you to hear this. You can go, but I just was saying, timeline briefing of when do you expect, obviously it's loose, but you were going into a little bit, when do you expect to access the CIP money? When do you expect things to happen? What has happened since 11 years? Just like a history, I just think for me, it would be helpful, and maybe for others to have access to something like that. So I don't know if that's something, if that's already been created, or if we can put something together.
Staff can certainly put pieces together that are related to the council's efforts. I think for what GLDC will be doing, that we'll need to defer to them to provide that timeline. So
maybe we can work together with you you probably already have many versions of this, but would love to.
Be happy to do it.
And I think, my recommendation would be just simply a memo that provides the timeline to the FED committee members and the whole council.
Perfect. There we go. That's why Jean's helps us out. And then, we mentioned the NDAs, MOUs, LOIs, obviously getting these anchor branded tenants. Obviously, NDA is kind of step one, right? So you can talk to somebody, right? A MOU and a LOI, you're moving further down. Can you give me, I know you can't disclose specific companies, you do talk about a little bit the types of companies in here,
Yes.
and I did a little back of the envelope math, which is always dangerous, but 4,000 plus jobs in the combination between these types of companies.
Yes.
Can you give me a sense of any more detail with those, but where are they NDA versus LOI versus, what the level of interest? Can you give me a better sense of that?
Yes, the level of interest is very robust because many of them have executives. These are all groups that are outside the area and from all around the country. And we have gotten to their executive suites, some of them their CEOs, who have had numerous visits to our site. We've got, some of them were on the 7th visit and 7th meeting to move along. It's down to pro formas and penciling out. So
Making the numbers work is where we're.
Making the
How
numbers-
many are at that stage? How many of them are at that level of interest?
I would say about 1.5 million square feet of commercial development and about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 jobs are at that stage right now
Of penciling out.
of trying to have this pencil.
All of these things about timelines contingent upon actually moving forward, which is based on the investors saying we're in,
Correct.
based on the math.
And we're not their only place they're looking. All right, so that's always the, so the two things that we're challenged with is how do we get this to pencil out? And how quickly can they move in and how does it fit into the timeline of they have versus all the other options that they're going around visiting?
And obviously, none of them have the FDA next to them, which you keep reminding them.
None of them have the FDA next to them, that is correct.
And then in your memo, you talk about the securing the required at-risk equity capital investments to finance and the construction of the roads, which we talked
Yes.
about.
And the first phase, I mean.
And the first phase.
If roads aren't good, if the utilities then go out to where they are, and so we have to do all the mass grading. And as I said, it's anywhere from $170 million to $200 million
And, okay, so
necessary for that first phase.
and so that's a 2019 activity. What are the challenges? What do we need to do to get that done?
Excellent. I love the question. It's the same process, which is the capital investor saying, and the lenders, if we're putting on $170 million to $200 million to get this done, show me that I'm going to get repaid, right? It's not, it's not something that they, and repaid and be competitive with the other places they can put their capital money. So, and these are capital investors who are out of New York, California, Texas, are the primary, and of course the local, the family capital going in. But that's why this is somewhat iterative process. That's why it goes NDAs, all those things. It's they have the interest to do this, but if after we go and we see all the potential end users say, well, I'm going to go to Massachusetts, I'm going to go to San Diego, and then all of a sudden we have nobody who's committed to go, the capital investors are saying, we can't spec on that much money. So it's an iterative process, and that's why we're working on this. And actually, we have sort of the other dimension to this, which is the opportunity zone rules have not been finalized yet. Right. And unfortunately, that's taken about a year longer than the federal government thought. So it's getting to the point we're really interested, and we're getting down to the can it pencil out? How can it pencil out? What would be the ways in which? So our homework assignment to them is tell us what's the recipe of what we need to make it pencil out as contingent to your making that commitment to invest, and then we'll work to get them. And I would expect that by the end of this year, we will have moved that process to getting some signed agreements with maybe some contingencies on them. And then early next year, we can move that along. And that's the fun part of this project. The last 11 years to get to this has been the challenging, but the promise and the opportunities are there.
So by the end of the year, you think you have some signed agreements, obviously, because
Yes, sir.
it's this chicken and egg of trying to, and then our homework assignment, you have a homework assignment to them. Obviously, our homework assignment is, well, what you mentioned, the scholarship, Councilmember Friesen aptly said, we got 40 million in the game already. What else is required? Because I think we all want to move urgently to give the right package. Obviously, the opportunity zone in the federal level, that would be great. That's something that comes from and can add to it and make it more attractive. But obviously, I know you're selling the $1.3 billion that you've told us about in potential revenue. Obviously, so I just continue to, and I know you're anxious too. What else is required from our end, and to move this along. And I think, all the potential's there, and, I am one of those kids that was low income and received a scholarship, and I think I did okay. So I like the analogy. But, please tell us either now or in the future, now would be ideal. What are you talking about when you say that? Can you get more specific around that?
Well, we want to, and my goal is to, by the time you come back from your August break, to have some concrete elements of what that recipe could be, and I think I've mentioned it. And
mentioned SSP and impact tax, and
right.
And I know I've talked to Dan and others who are here.
Yeah, and I think those things, and we could then be able to demonstrate how the correlation between what that scholarship program would be and who we attract on account of that. And we're getting close, and just know that not only am I meeting with the capital investors and the lenders and the executives of the end users we want to have, as well as educational institutions, but I'm also meeting with the state and federal government. I mean, this week I'm meeting with Secretary Holt and Frank Dickstein of the State Department of Housing Community Development on how the state can help leverage it. So I think because the opportunity and the promise and what the vision is and the legacy project is so important, and we're looking at every ways in which it's not going to be a simple solution, one single silver bullet's going to make or break it. It's going to be a recipe of things. We're determined to get that and be able to start having that conversation by the time we get back from August break.
And I just wanted to thank Dan Wilhelm and Pete, who was here. I think, there he is, and all the folks in East County who have been advocates and been working hard on this. I just want to publicly thank them.
And many of them are supposed to join us at the dais. So I will turn to the council president, but invite the next panel to come up and join us as well. Jonathan, you'll, I think, remain there. Council president may want to ask you a question, but why don't we close this out?
Chair Reamer, could I take a second to back up and add a few things?
Well, it's the council president's mic right now, so she may want you to do that, or we'll come back to you.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Asante, Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Asante, Mr. Fletcher, before we get into the community conversation. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. So I just wanted to get a sense, I know that obviously we're all very familiar with, and Mr. Asante, of course, more than anybody, of the priority that this particular project had on County Executive Legate's agenda. And of course, there's a lot that we can do, but a lot of it is going to rest on what the executive is going to send over as well. So I just wanted to get a sense in terms of County Executive Legate, Elrich, priority regarding this particular project. We have all felt that obviously having FDA is a major asset, and many of our federal, agencies, we've been predicating a lot of our master plans, on this. I think, County Executive Elrich has been publicly quoted as not thinking that having the FDA there as an asset is really something that will propel this project forward. So I'm just trying to understand, because I think now we're literally trying, I think this is like a check-in moment to see where we are and how we're going to boost this forward. What have been some of the conversations, and will we, be getting obviously the same level of support from the Elrich administration that we did from the Leggett administration?
Sure. Good morning. Greg Allison, Department of General Services. I'll let Mr. Fletcher represent the county executive's position on your questions. But before that, I just wanted to obviously talk about some of the past and the fact that we do have an existing CIP project, which you obviously reviewed as part of your deliberations for the FY20 CIP, and that still is representative of both administrations' commitment to this project and the $40 million that was referenced by Mr. Jen. Moving forward in terms of putting together the FY21 and beyond CIP, we're in the process of doing that currently. One of the strategies employed by this administration, both the CAO and CE, has been starting the CIP process much earlier than we typically do. And so that started in May. And so we're in the process of putting together all of our CIP projects, and that will extend throughout the summer instead of initiating in the fall as we've done in the past. So with that, I'll let Mr. Fletcher discuss the executive's position on the
I
future.
appreciate that. Before you turn to Mr. Fletcher, obviously, if there's going to be any kind of conversation about incentives or any particular capital, appropriation vis-a-vis incentives, et cetera, it really has to be included in the executive's request because, as everybody knows, it's much more difficult for the council to then have to find money after we receive the budget. So I just want to make sure that this is also on the radar as a priority, and just wanted to do that check-in. Mr. Fletcher.
Yes, good morning, and thank you. I would like to say that, I have not had a detailed conversation with the executive on this exact topic. I can say that I can get back and provide you probably a memo that will give you an up-to-date perspective of where he stands at. I know that he shares the commitment to improve the area, but I think you need a better level of detail than that.
I appreciate that, and yeah, I mean, this is a major component of our overall economic development strategy. It really touches upon a lot of policy areas that we have all been extraordinarily involved in, and with great effort. So the sooner that you can have that conversation and let us know, the better it will be. I mean, obviously, as I said, we need to work together on this, and so much has happened already, some community involvement, already some investment has gone into this. We have extraordinary partners. So this is a huge deal for a very large part of our county. And I think we're positioned really well at this moment in time, but we need to know where we stand. Joy Nermi was here earlier, and she has played a major role under the Leggett administration and also securing the FDA, the continued consolidation with the staff. I mean, there's a lot of activity that has taken place, so it's important for us to know as soon as possible, where does this land on the new executive's agenda?
Okay, will do. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Pete, what couple bullet points you want to make here?
Yes, thank you, Chair. One is backing up a few minutes where the question was asked about the FDA and their possible expansion. So Tina Benjamin in the executive office, Joy Nermi, who's now over here, but before, Melanie Wagner and some others, including me, have been working with the FDA for almost 2 years about this process of possibly building and leasing property. So they know we're willing to help them.
It's a possibility. It's out there.
Forward. I just want to clarify that we're aware of it and working on it. The second thing, in reference to President Navarro's question and the enthusiasm or support from the county executive, I met with Mr. Elridge 2 times last week. There were one-on-one meetings to go over specifics on just White Oak. And the first meeting went so well, he wanted to meet again, and we did. He is very interested in some of the projects that we're working on. We're not ready to sort of bring too many details to you, but one of them is an innovation district for White Oak, which would go hand in hand with the Adventist Hospital there and the FDA and so forth. And so that's something we're working hard on. And the Friends of White Oak, that's an idea that came out of them. Thank you
So much. I really appreciate it.
All right, so I'm going to summarize what I heard from Jonathan Jen, which is that this big vision here is kind of, there's it's not a chicken and an egg, but there's this combination of factors. You've got to get the investors to say go, and that's going to be somewhat based on prospective tenants saying yes. But that's the real issue. Everything else, the schedules and everything, it's all dependent upon green lights coming from the private sector investors, that your partners, who they will be, and then your prospective tenants. And that's what we're really trying to understand. How can we help get to success with that side of it?
And I just want to emphasize how much we appreciate that, because these are public meetings and the capital investors and everyone can listen in, and these kinds of sentiments go a long way to the commitment that ways in which we can get it done. Sort of what do we need and when do we need it to make it happen to get those jobs? And I can't thank you enough for initiating this conversation. Thank you.
All right, so to close this out, we've got Bill Tompkins, COO at the EDC, and we have some community partners. Sarah Miller is in the audience, and I don't see Barry, but
Mr. Chair, Barry White has had something he had to get to work for, but Shayna Davis Cook is here on behalf of Friends of White Oak.
okay. And I know we've met, but you all have.
Unless I lead the marketing at MCEDC.
Okay, great. So, Bill, why don't you?
I can still say good morning.
Thank you.
And in addition to Warren, who's going to walk us through the marketing piece, the most important part of our team, Macias McConan, is sitting behind us. He's our Summer Rise student and represents the best and brightest of Montgomery County. So please welcome him.
Thank you.
In your report, I think we've summarized our primary activities, and I would like to either correct or update the record for a second. While we are known for pitching the entire county and the 6 key industries that are important to us, we are absolutely focused on destinations. And you're seeing that in our strategy and our budget, partly here in White Oak, but we're coming back to talk about White Flint. We have a huge initiative that will be kicking off in Wheaton. We have another district, again, we've talked about White Flint, but Silver Spring, and the list goes on, and that will absolutely continue. We've talked about opportunity zones. Jonathan, I think you did the tour that we did. We are big proponents of the opportunity zones across the county, and
You led a tour. The EDC organized a tour of the opportunities.
Yes, yes, back in, I think it was February. So that will absolutely continue, and I think it will have a real impact. We've added 2 additional people to the staff on both the attraction side and the retention side so that we can better cover this region, both around the DMV, by the way, not just outside of this region, but a heavier emphasis in the DMV. There's a lot here that we can still do. The report, I think, speaks for itself that we do have projects both on the attraction and retention side. We were just, one of our members was in Israel literally the end of May, pitching White Oak, believe it or not, for a life sciences company, and those activities will continue. It is part of our portfolio, and we are happy to do whatever we can to support that in addition to other business centers across the county. With that,
let me just say that's great. That's great to know. It's a little bit different than some of the testimony that we heard during one of our sessions. So I'm really excited to hear that you're being very strategic around.
we are, and that's why I clarified that it's an update. You see it in our current plan, and you'll see much more activity both now and going forward. Because of time, I think we are doing quite a bit to support the marketing efforts. So I'm going to turn it over to Warren. We've got 7 different items just to show you today, and all of this is focused on White Oak.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Warren Ellis, and I lead the marketing team at Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. I'll briefly go through 11 different tools. One of them is thinkwhiteoak.com, which is a narrative story map that we ended up doing, partnering with Matt Felton at Jada Story, which goes through a lot of the demographics and workforce, quality of life, development, accessibility, and it's the data is in real time, so it updates every day, and it's powered through ISRI. Since last year, we've had 751 visitors.
So you built that site about a year ago?
We did.
Thinkwhiteoak.com. Great.
Yep. And our business developers use it as well as the county.
Right.
We did a video as part of our Think Success for Adventist. And even though the hospital that we concentrated on is not in White Oak, the last third of it is at the site of White Oak. We'll be very excited to be able to update that now that there's so much construction going on. And that, of course, has been circulated. We've had a little over 9,000 views on that. We had the content's been in several newsletters. We put out 3 to 4 a month, but this one was just for White Oak, and Jay Rue was nice enough to be interviewed for a Q&A for it, as well as we ended up leading to the brochure that we have online that I'll get to, the Adventist video that we just showed, and we went in to talk about our opportunity zones, which I'll get to. And we had almost 4,000 opens on that. On the website on thinkmoco.com, we have two sections on White Oak. One is about lifestyle, and one is about community, commercial areas. This is the commercial area one, which also leads to the video and online brochure and the one sheet, which I'll talk about. The brochure for White Oak is 52 pages. It's downloadable, but most people just use it online so they can flip through just parts that they need in conference rooms or on the hood of a car or anywhere there's a laptop. And I hope you have time to take a look at it, because there's a lot of good demographics, not just about White Oak, but about Maryland and about the DMV as well. We did a placemat or a one-sheeter that can be printed out that people can have for meetings. It just has some quick stats as well about White Oak. Pete had a great idea about doing a trifold, so we took a lot of the 52 pages and put it just into a trifold that people could get through easily. And then Montgomery was a campaign that we did where we filmed about 370 videos and did a year-long Twitter campaign. Some of them were from White Oak, and we had just 4 from White Oak from there, but we are going to repurpose it as part of the brochure for We Are White Oak. It was part of a Twitter campaign that ended up having a lot of impressions. And then the Opportunity Zone event, which was very successful, very well attended. And we had bus tours on that too, also included White Oak. And here's just a little information about it, about the different people that spoke, including Mr. Ten. So we're very excited about that. So that's what we've done so far. We're always looking for additional opportunities to partner for White Oak. Thank you.
Super. Appreciate your work to build the success there. I'll go to Ms. Davis-Cook.
I guess I'm at the good afternoon phase of the day. Hello. Glad to be before you in my other role. You've seen me here, of course, representing one of the county's municipalities. So I'm happy to be here to talk about White Oak as a member of the Friends of White Oak. And as has really been touched on today, there is a lot that has happened in the past couple of years, both at the community level as well as the development level. And really, Friends of White Oak took some time to really focus on what our role should be, representing various aspects of the White Oak area. Communities, nonprofits, we do have representation from the 2 major retail centers, with representation from the Duffy companies, as well as from the B.F. Saul company, the owner of the White Oak Shopping Center. And so really what we've done through our meetings is focus on ways that we can have that placemaking and branding really focused on, because we want to get away from whatever notions people may have of what White Oak is. And that has to start first, we believe, at the county level and then expand outward. And so we did have this visioning session in the spring of this year that Pete focused on earlier, that talked about the various things that we're going to focus our energies on. The opportunity zones have been talked about. That's something that's been high on our radar. The innovation district through food hall program is something that one of our members has been focused on. We're very happy to see, though, the high quality construction for those properties that have taken place already in the White Oak area, with the Washington Adventist Hospital, which please do take the opportunity to tour it. It is incredible, the attention to detail, and that it really feels like a special place. It's not just a relocated hospital. The attention to detail, the public amenity with the lake and walking path behind the building there, the finishes that were really focused on making it high quality in the East County. And we want that to be the narrative. And so that's part of what we're promoting. The Hilton, the Home 2 Suites, again, high quality in the East County. And we hope that these things that are beginning to roll out will really be the benchmarking for these other property owners that have been touched on to reinvest in the community as well. So I'm very happy to hear how much this committee and the council president are really on board for the vision and for what needs to be done. We are continuing to have conversations, again, about changing that narrative. We do have a Silver Spring district officer that now sits on our board so that we can focus on some of the public safety aspects of changing the narrative for White Oak so that we are not a place that is known for certain incidents, unfortunate incidents that have occurred. So we do have that public safety representation on the board as well. Having, again, high-quality police station that was placed just on the other side of the White Oak Science Gateway master plan area along 29. Again, I think another reference to that things are changing here. Some of the things that have concerned us, as was noted, the really relocation of the Trader Joe's. We are happy to see it coming into the White Oak Science Gateway master plan area, but we also recognize that what's happening on our borders is going to impact what's happening inside that master plan area. It's not some magic line that great things are going to happen inside if we're not paying attention to what's happening just outside that line. So those are things that we're monitoring as well. The cleanup day that we had earlier this year, where over 1,000 pounds of trash were picked up by just about 25 volunteers along Route 29. Again, was a concept that was initially envisioned by the Friends of White Oak membership and that we saw through. We advocated pretty heavily for the Hillendale Local Park funding at the Capitol level. We saw that as an important showcase for what is happening here, and a way that will also bring families moving into the area. You know, we certainly recognize that FDA has done a wonderful job of bringing their employees to the site from neighborhoods outside, but we want people living within this area. And so if we can show them high-quality park amenities and the redone library and all of these different things, we think that's all going to just show that the shift is happening. So I agree with the comments that have been made. There's still a lot more to be done, and certainly we don't think that this is not going to be a long process with a lot of hands needing to be in the mix. But there certainly is a lot that has been done or is being done, and we want to make sure that those things are being highlighted and that story is being told. So one of the things that I think would certainly be important for the members of the council is to tell these stories and help us to get this narrative out there for the larger county and region to know the great things that are happening in the East County, starting with the White Oak area. So those are just a few of the things that I wanted to touch on, but if the members of the committee have any questions, happy to answer.
Well, thank you for doing this work in your own time. So you're using your professional skills from your career to...
Try my best.
Thank you. It's really terrific. Really appreciate that. And yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Be assured that we're constantly touting the extraordinary assets of the East County, connecting the opportunities that will evolve. And I know, Jonathan, you were there when Springbrook High School, we had a coding for ESOL students and other students, and Jonathan came and he brought the renderings. And it was such an aha moment for students to realize that, right next door, you're going to have all these extraordinary opportunities. Start now to get involved in things like coding and, STEM careers. And so we're constantly making sure that the school system understands that this is an ecosystem that really can shift this area. And it will be a benefit to the entire county because we can then expand our tax base, not only allow opportunities for a lot of people to move in there, but also to expand opportunities for jobs and opportunities for our young people. I mean, there's just so much writing into this, but we're constantly there as champions, and we, so much appreciate the community also being so actively involved in pushing the envelope as well. So we'll keep working on that. But I remember that particular event and how students just, you would hear them talk to each other and say, wow, really, that's going to be coming, around here, and I can get this job, and it's going to pay this much. And, it's really amazing to make those connections in that way for that part of the county. So.
And that was one thing I did just briefly want to touch on. We talk a lot about job creation, and really I think that we need to change the perspective to career creation, that we don't want people to just get jobs that are close to where they live. We want people to think in terms of careers and career path, and that I can start off at the ground level in a biotech industry, and this is something that I can promote my way through into an actual career. So that's one of the things that we've been talking about by having such great assets like FDA, like Washington Adventist Hospital, so forth and so on, that we should really be talking more about promoting career tracks, not just jobs in the East County.
Absolutely, yeah. And the fact that you can have that continuum is really exciting, because it's not just about postdoctorate, postgraduate positions. I mean, you will have, technical positions that move through the continuum. And that's also important, and I think attractive to many of these potential companies, because if they see that we have a workforce, that pipeline that is ready and that it's right there, that's usually one of the big questions as well. So yeah, I think all of those components are very much in place for us to get this done. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. We are we're going to wrap up here. Councilmember Friedson has a meeting, needs to make it too. We are going to have a discussion at the end of July about the opportunity zones. We're going to learn a lot more about that. We're going to hear how those incentives stack up with the federal and the state. We've heard from the private sector leader for this vision that they're having challenges making the numbers work, and everything that we're talking about, it's all hooked to the possibility of a private sector led investment program. And I have to say, the impact tax rate in this area is higher than in our most successful commercial areas. You pay more impact taxes here than you do in Bethesda or Silver Spring or a lot of Rockville. So we are asking for the private sector to do more here, but charging them more taxes, and I have a lot of concerns about that. So we're going to talk that issue through as we get into the opportunity zones this month, and figure out how we can, ensure that the cranes will arrive and the office buildings will go up, and that we can actually, create this vision that we have and make it succeed. So thank you for a great discussion today, and we'll continue this conversation soon. Thanks.
Nice.